Hello, PHED 112 and 612 students. This podcast is a review of Chapter 6 that we did not get to during class. You do have your textbooks to be able to read it, but I have put some slides into this PowerPoint that will help you with quiz number 1 that's going to be open from 6 a.m. to 11:59 p.m. on Friday, January the 30th. There will also be content from Chapter 1 that we went over in class on Monday. Just as a review of Chapter 1, remember that we talked about quality physical education programs and how physical education has many benefits: reducing heart disease, alleviating chronic back pain for adults, improves students' grades, their behavior, it reinforces class subjects, and physical education is not only focusing on the motor domain or the psychomotor domain, but also the affective domain, feelings, social skills, and the cognitive domain, understandings and concepts. But now let's get to Chapter 6 and talk about planning. Planning is a process of developing a progression of learning experiences that are productive, beneficial, and interesting to children. It's a well thought out guide, and it provides clear direction to accomplish the lesson goals. As we create our lesson plans, a lesson provides a clear direction for us to be able to organize students and get them to learn something. We develop the content by translating the plan to the gym, the court, the field, the playground, the pool, the tennis courts, and all ever-changing and dynamic teaching areas that are difficult to plan for. A lesson plan is not a one-size-fits-all lesson. We have to try and meet the needs of every child in the class. In the kindergarten and preschool classes, we tend to focus on a teaching style called exploration. We try to set up movement challenges for the students during our classes and get them to try and explore movement instead of us telling them what to do all the time. For teachers, planning is done on their own time, and therefore many people avoid it or wait until the last minute to write the lesson plan. But if you think that lesson plans are not required for physical education out in the schools, I would suggest that you go to Fort Mill School District, areas of Rock Hill School District, York School District, Clover School District, and Lancaster. They all have their own lesson plan formats, and physical education teachers do write lesson plans. Experienced teachers, however, don't have to write a very long lesson plan because they know from experience what is a good thing to do with most of their classes. They have already had many of the children the year before in a lower class. Disorganization and spending a lot of time on management is a hallmark of a lesson that's not planned very effectively. The benefits of a well-planned class is that the class runs more smoothly, students are learning something from you and learning more from you because you're more organized, and there's less off-task behavior. That's probably the best result of a good lesson plan. And by the way, effective teachers use many resources to plan their lessons. They don't just go by what they remember from what somebody else told them. They look up on the internet and they try to find different teaching ideas. So we'll move on to the next slide. Some key concepts are that reflective teachers plan and revise their plans over a course of a career. They don't use one lesson plan for 26 years in a row. Planning in this chapter is divided into 4 steps. The first step is developing a curriculum scope that outlines the content to be taught for several years. Basically, an overall annual curriculum is planned for every grade level. The second step is you decide how many lessons will be devoted to each of the skill themes and movement concepts and fitness concepts during a year. And it's important to remember that 1 year equals 36 weeks when you are planning. And if you only have the children one time a week for 36 weeks, that's only 36 lessons you have to teach the South Carolina standards for that grade level. The third step is to develop assessments to make sure that the students are learning what you have put on the lesson plan. Your objectives should match the assessments. A block plan is usually used for a unit plan for a week or 2 weeks or however long a unit is, and each of the blocks represents one day's lesson. But then the last step that we do is develop daily lesson plans that are interesting and beneficial to youngsters. In our case at McFeet and St. John's, we are not using a unit. We're going to just plan 3 lesson plans for each of you, and we'll use particular content for that. Ideally, lessons encourage students to be physically active during a majority of the lesson. If it were up to me, your lessons would be 80% physical activity. But what we look for is at least 50% or more of the class to be physically active. That would be considered a good lesson in physical education. This last point is very important. Just because a lesson is fun does not mean that it is a productive learning experience for children. Lesson plans and teaching are affected by class size. If you have 35 people in a class, it's harder to teach than a class of 25 people. Frequency of class meetings, available equipment and facilities, the children's characteristics, which is part of your lesson plan. We want to actually put on the lesson plan what their proficiency skill level is, and also what physical activities they do outside of school that we can apply to what we're teaching in the lesson that day. We just talked about these 4 steps, so there's no need really to go over it again. One thing I did want to remind you of also is not only do we have 36 weeks in the year or the school year, but we have 180 days. It's important to develop the scope and the sequence. The scope means the breadth or the depth that you go into in the content or with the content, and the sequence is the progression. You've probably heard the word progression used a lot for lesson plans. The scope really defines what you want to teach over the different grade levels in your school. For instance, if you have kindergarten through 5th grade, you would have a different curriculum guide for each of the grade levels, and it would represent what students should know and be able to do at the end of that particular grade level. Here is a sample of the movement, concept, scope, and sequence for grades K through 5. It does represent step 1. This is a sample scope and sequence for skill themes in grades K through 5. Notice that the X's represent how many days they are going to spend on that particular skill theme. It's also important to remember that skill themes are revisited throughout the year in different grade levels. Basically, a yearly overview is what you do in that grade level for the entire year. You like to put that on a piece of paper so you can see what the units are that you have between weeks and during weeks. The lower elementary emphasis is on concepts, and the upper elementary emphasis is on skill themes. But we use the movement wheel to go back and forth between the movement concepts and the skill themes and try to relate them to each other. This is a sample annual curriculum going by numbers of days in kindergarten, 2nd grade, and 4th grade over the year. The first time you introduce concepts or skill themes, it will take several lessons to get students to understand what that means, particularly concepts like personal space or self-space versus general space. The older the children are, the longer they're able to remain on the same skill theme. At the top of your lesson plan, you should always put what the lesson focus is for that day, as well as the movement concepts. Learning, of course, is not totally predictable. We have to adjust our lessons according to what the student responses are. But the advantages of revisiting skill themes are that it helps children remember the key points. It's like you're reteaching them the same concepts. You can also teach the same exact lesson again later in the year. Assessments are probably the most important part of the lesson because it tells you whether the students have actually accomplished what you set out for them to accomplish in your objectives. You should never wait until the end of the school year to do assessments on your students to prove that they're learning. It should be an ongoing type of assessment. And that's the end of podcast 1. Podcast 2 will start with the next slide.